The Learning Portrait shows us what the future of education can look like in Coppell ISD. It paints a picture of activity, students inquiring, debating, and gathering resources to create meaningful projects so that they can show off the artist within. It turns education as we know it upside down, equipping teachers with digital devices, allowing students to show off their learning and their ownership in new ways. The result? Students graduating into colleges and careers in order to compete in the diverse and highly technical global marketplace.
The very first day of school, my kids were very curious about why I didn't have a teacher desk. And I explained to them, I said, why would I have a teacher desk? And they said, well, this is your classroom. And I told my kids, it's not my classroom, it's your classroom. And I saw them start taking ownership of their environment, and it was beautiful. I believe the transformation started last year when my kids were desiring more room to collaborate, more room to work together, get comfortable, sit on the floor.
We're finding with the age of our building, we have limited space in the classrooms. And so I started looking around the hallways to see what we had to work with, and realized we've got lots of space out here in the halls that can be utilized. And so we've bought some small desks and chairs, tables that are portable to put out here in the hallway, sofas to make the learning environment more comfortable, more a warm place, an inviting place for kiddos to learn.
And it doesn't detract from what they're capable of doing. It doesn't cause me to have to lower my expectations. In fact, I think that they are more likely to take academic risks when they feel at ease and comfortable in their environment. We have the Hub, which is a blended learning lab.
That's almost, that kind of coffee shop type environment.
That our learners can go to throughout the week to work independently. But really the main difference is that they have technology all the time, and that what we have designed for them to do is using that technology in order to construct meaning and make connections and meet the expectations that we've set for them.
I think the biggest factor is that students who learn at different speeds, it allows them to go at their own pace. And so for those students who maybe have a little more struggles on the content, I can work with them here in the classroom and send those who have mastered the content to our virtual lab where they work and go on to the next module.
I feel like it's given me more freedom, more opportunity to just really engage my individual learners, to engage small groups, and really explore what it is that each of them individually needs.
When I was in school, the educator, or the teacher in that case, was the content specialist. All they did was give us information. In the last few years, especially when I started teaching, we've really evolved to getting to know the learner very personally, understanding who they are, what are their fears, what are their strengths, what are their areas of growth, how do we push them, how do we get them to their level to meet their potential. Every student comes in at their level, and I say, how can I get you above that? I don't care how gifted you are. If you come in here, I expect you to grow. We know that our students come from different backgrounds, and I think diversity it's multifaceted. So it's not just the ethnicity, it's also their learning styles as well.
Everybody has a different way of learning, whether it's auditory or visual or kinesthetic, so you have to think about that, incorporate that in the lesson when you're planning. So brain-based strategies, they're strategies where you're thinking about how kids think and where they're at developmentally. I try to make sure I use, the multiple intelligences. I put that into my thinking whenever I plan. So I have Socratic seminars, I have mini group discussions, I do lit circles. I try to employ those things so that it's constantly moving with the learning target in mind.
All of the teachers are trying to figure out how you are as a person, and the teachers make an effort to learn how I learn.
I'm just excited about education today and where it's going. When I was going to school, I sat in the rows and teachers told you what to do. But right now, education is bringing purpose in what our learners are learning, and they are taking a big role in their education and in their future. I was looking for global learning. That's where the future's going. And I need to make sure that my learners are prepared for their future. I was able to find a global partner in Brazil for my learners. They've been Skyping with their global partners to build a lunar module vehicle. So through this process, they're learning to collaborate with partners abroad. They're able to make a plan and set their goals and give and take and ask questions. And through this process, they're taking ownership in their learning. And when they can do that, their future's bright.
Inquiry-based learning to me is it's more of a paradigm, if you will. It's a model of teaching and learning. Really the broad stroke is that I come up with a question that helps guide them in an exploration, and then from there they start asking themselves questions and leading themselves through investigations to help them make sense of, in this case, their natural world.
I think it's like a bunch of hands-on things. That's what I love doing in science. Usually we just get a test book out and read, but this year some things just clicked and we do a lot of science things in the science lab, a lot of hands-on.
So if you walk into my classroom on any given day, you're going to see learners taking control of their learning. You might see learners walking around asking themselves investigable questions, things that they want to know about something we've explored.
I feel like it changes the way I learn because he gives us freedom with our own ideas. We come and do hands-on things, and then he'll come over, and if we're having like trouble, or he'll come over and kind of observe what we're doing and he'll talk to us about it. And like sometimes he'll lead us in a question. Mr. Eubank is giving us a lot of questions that lead us to questions.
Okay, so why do you think that? And I think for me the biggest transformation has been the educator handing over the learning to them. So it's kind of blended too for me where it's constructivist, right? They're creating a definition of what it means for themselves versus me having to give them that meaning. And of course, it's much more powerful and engaging when you have learners making sense of something for themselves versus the teacher up front saying, okay, so you guys, here's what it means. Now, what do you think about that?
I just feel I'm more trusted because he's giving us a lot of freedom for taking responsibility, just even more than we've had the past few years of elementary school. But with great freedom comes great responsibility. If we don't use it responsible, he takes it back.
Understanding by design. That means that we are teaching our students in such a way that we have the end in mind. What do we want them to accomplish? What do we want them to learn?
What do we want them to understand?
What do I want them to know and take with them for years to come?
And then we back it up that way, which is a much different way of thinking, but it's very powerful.
When I design a lesson for my class, the very first thing that I usually go back and look at is I say, okay, what should they already know? What is their prior knowledge?
What do you know about this subject? Can you tell me, when have you heard this word before? I really like kids to get involved in the learning, to share with me what they know. A lot of these kids know a lot more than they even realize they know.
And then I might give them a pre-test or something that shows me exactly where each of my learners are at so that we can grow from there.
We ask a lot of questions, and I tell them, you know what, if I'm asking you a question, it doesn't mean that you gave me the wrong answer. But I want to know why you feel like you need to do that. Because if you can tell me why, then I know you can transfer that knowledge to another problem or another situation.
I want to scaffold their learning, but I don't want to just give them the answer. I want them to think about their own thinking. So that scaffolding piece is huge. It really helps them develop their knowledge and their understanding.
Collaborative learning is crucial.
Working with a partner or working in groups together, they're supporting each other, they're helping each other.
And what I like to hear are those kids who are more advanced, helping those who are struggling a little bit and saying, well, no, it's this way. And if I figure if a student can teach it, then they've learned it.
In my classroom, I want my students to be able to model their thinking and show me multiple representations of various data and various ideas. So for instance, I will give them a prompt and I want them to be able to create an equation and then create a table from that and then create a word problem from that, and they can just keep going and they can show me all of these different levels and all of this different deep understanding, so they are able to just continually take it to the next level.
You guys did all.
When we look at the concept enduring understanding, it's basically what do we want the students to take with them outside of the classroom.
At the end of the class, I might ask them, what was the big idea today? What was it all about? What was the point? And some of the responses I get are just phenomenal. So they really are able to put the pieces together when they look back and reflect it. Why do we do this in general? Why am I going to need this next year or in 10 years from now? Why can I apply this in an authentic way to my life?
It really is a different mindset when you're creating lessons, to have the end in mind before you even start. It feels much more complete. At the end of the year, I feel as though I've empowered the child as opposed to just giving them some knowledge that they're going to regurgitate to me. It's much more powerful. It's wonderful. I absolutely love it.
Years ago, when I started teaching, I was more of a lecture-based teacher. However, today, I'm more of a guide where I facilitate and show my students the pathway to get to their end product.
A lot of school districts, including CISD, have really moved away from the term instruction and started using scaffolding because it's a much more specific word to describe what we do. If you can think of what a scaffold is, it is something that holds up a building in the process of it being constructed. That's what scaffolding does, is it holds up our learners in a way that once we pull it away, they will still have the foundation and the structure present so that the learning exists and they can move forward.
In a project-based learning environment, of course, we're scaffolding toward something big, some big product, some big presentation, something that is kind of intimidating and large. And I'm merely that scaffold, that support that helps come by after the fact and helps kind of correct and move them along in the process so that when they get to that big picture, they're ready for it.
Questioning is essential to scaffolding, especially in a PBL model. If our projects are truly authentic, if they are truly learner-centered, then I need to know what my learners need to know in order to complete a project, and I can't do that unless I question.
We think about the questions that the students will need to know for the future. What are the things that they're going to need to know 40 years from now? What are those applicable real-world things? And they're very open-ended, where students can either take it to a higher level or we can scaffold it down to meet them where they are.
If I try to run a project based on what I think learners need to know, then I lose authenticity and I actually lose any kind of motivation for them to learn.
So literature circles can look like a lot of different things. I think at its heart, it's about a text. At the end of the day, that's our content. That's what we're trying to drive at. It's any structure, it's any grouping of kids that's going to orient them around a text and allow that dialogue to expand, to multiply knowledge. And so that can be a small group that is 2 or 3 kids over a poem, or that could be chunking up a novel into several different segments and having each group present different parts of it. I think the key to it being a literature circle, if you were going to define it by one thread, would be that the learners themselves are making meaning outside of any judgment from me at the front end of setting a parameter, setting a boundary for, here is what qualifies as a legitimate opinion.
And we do a lot of Socratic seminars.
The Socratic seminar goes all the way back to Socrates, who got his pupils, his tutors, to think by simply asking them questions.
We get into 2 circles. The middle circle discusses the topic really, and we ask questions that we made beforehand. And the outside of the circle listens to the discussions, and if they have an outside comment, they can jump in.
They get to say what they like, what they dislike, what they feel, And they get to do that with each other, with students that they care about, students they don't know very well. At all levels, they're able to truly sit into a group in a circle and talk. And then there's also an outside circle that's listening. And so they're growing and they're communicating and they're inspiring each other through their words.
And so it's not as if in a Socratic seminar every answer is valid, every answer has to be right, and every level of thinking is, oh, great job. We're not applauding everyone for right where they are. We're accepting them right where they are, but then we're also pushing them to move a little bit forward. And we're doing so in a way that's not didactic, that's not forceful, but rather it generates an authentic, deeper level understanding of something rather than simply projecting it outward from an authoritative source, like myself.
Assessment is really important because assessment serves as a motive for kids to go back and really make sure that they understand every detail, because it's really easy to sit there and have information fed to you or kind of like glance over the book so that you can complete the worksheet that's due tomorrow and not really understand it. But like the second you have to stand in front of all your peers and teach it back to them, you have to really understand the concept.
Assessment is testing where a student is. It's knowing where they are in that spectrum of knowledge so they know which direction they can move in and which areas they need to improve in.
Any teacher uses summative assessment, which is testing your students' knowledge at the end of a unit, giving a multiple choice test or giving an essay, and then grading what they know. There's the other side of formative assessment, and that's really taking the opportunity to assess for learning, to have short checkpoints throughout the entire unit where I can see, do my learners really understand this material?
We are constantly, daily, by the minute, formatively assessing our students so that we really know, what does each individual student know? How can I go back and help them better understand?
We stop and slow down. See if our students know this information, assess for learning, rather than assessing for a grade in the grade book and then moving on.
And so there's just all sorts of ways that we can just look at it and just constantly gather our data and know my students really understand this and they're ready to move on, or my students aren't quite comfortable with this, let's spend another day on it and let's really drive this point home.
Sometimes we do a formative assessment called Talk a Mile a Minute. And that one's great for vocabulary and introducing new concepts. The way we do it is we put a word up on the projector and one kid is facing away, they're in partners, and the other student is facing the board so they can see the word. So their job is to use the knowledge that they've learned about that concept to try to describe it to their partner. So as I'm walking around, I'm getting to see the person that's describing it, how well they know that concept. And I'm also being able to tell from the person who's guessing whether they're catching on to those clues or whether they still have no idea what that is.
It's kind of fun to just play around with different definitions, and you kind of have to think about it instead of just memorizing what it means.
That way they're getting to learn from the other students and share their knowledge. Summative assessment is also very important because I'm able to see in one big picture what all my kids were able to do. Formative assessment gives me little things along the way, and it gives me places where as a teacher I can differentiate, increase my learning, whereas summative at the end gives me the whole big picture to be able to see in full what my students were able to learn, and they're able to show that to me.
Because I teach AP and IB students, they have a summative exam at the end of their course. And so they need practice in taking a summative assessment, and they need some of that feedback to know, okay, what do I need to focus on when I'm getting ready for that summative exam that's required of me. What we use is a smart response. So basically it looks like a little remote control, and it has the options for them to put in A, B, C, D.
You insert your whatever letter you think it is.
And as soon as I turn it off, on their clicker it says, here's what your score is, and they can even scroll through and see which questions they missed.
When it's fresh in your mind and you see exactly, like right after the test, what you missed, it's fresh in your mind and you're like, wait, why did I miss that? You talk to your friends and you talk about it, and it's more immediate.
And so really, summative assessment and formative assessment have to come hand in hand I would say that you wouldn't be able to survive without formative assessment, being able to have those checkpoints and kind of test the temperature of your classroom and see. If you only did it on summative assessment, you'd have no idea where your kids are at up until that point.
I have seen great results with my students. I think my kids are more confident in their summative assessments when they're showing me at the end the culmination of their learning, because we've had little formative assessments along the way, and it's made me a better teacher and it's made them better learners.
We hope you've enjoyed seeing some examples of the learning portrait in action and have gained a greater understanding of what the future holds for Coppell ISD.